Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Brook's Milan Unboxing. You can follow me on Twitter at Brook's Unboxing. Also check out my blog www.couchpotatofightguru.blogspot.com, and I'm of course a contributor to The Ring, the Bible of Boxing. Now Saturday in the bubble at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, the man from Sheffield, Kell, the special one, Brook, will have to be really special because he is walking into the last chance saloon when he challenges WBO World Welterweight Champion Terence Crawford. Now, Kell Brook has had a sort of a curious career. He has shown tremendous courage and self-belief in some of the choices he's made, but you sometimes have to wonder whether he made the right career choices. Now, sometimes it worked out, like in 2014 when he traveled to the States and took the IBF welterweight title from an undefeated at the time Shawn Porter, and you know Shawn Porter is a handful. He's still a major player in the welterweight division, and that was a very good win for Kell Brook. Not a lot of British fighters win world titles on the road. It's a difficult thing to do, and he did so, outpointing Porter in a hard fight. And a lot was expected of Kell Brook when they thought that he might be among the elite of fighters, but it never quite materialized. He made 3 successful defenses of his world title, but he never got the other champions in the ring. And I think sort of out of desperation, he shocked everybody by suddenly jumping 2 divisions to challenge Gennady Golovkin. I think he was sort of a replacement for Chris Eubank Jr. when they couldn't get the contracts done. So it seemed like a suicide mission. Brook fought valiantly. Golovkin was a monster at the time, knocking everybody out. Brook had his moments, but eventually Golovkin stopped him in the 5th round. Dominic Ingle throwing in the towel, and for his trouble, Kell Brook suffered a fractured eye socket in that fight. Then nobody sort of expected he's going to go back down to welterweight to defend his title, because the mandatory contender was an undefeated Errol Spence, another monster that nobody wanted a part of. But sure enough, Kell Brook went all the way back down to welter, fought Errol Spence the following year, started off well, then Spence gradually took over and knocked him out in the 11th round, and once again that eye stood in a huge bump and re-injured. So from then on he's kind of been floundering. You know, the following year he's been settled at junior middleweight, had 2 fights there, sat out 2019, and then in February this year came back to knock out Mark DeLuca, who has a good record, but he's not really a top world-class fighter at the very top level, so you can't tell much from that. Now he is going straight back down to welter this time again, and he's taking on Terence Crawford, who's undefeated freeweight world champion. My friend in East London, AC Renele, he doesn't like Crawford, but Crawford is among the pound for pound best in the world because of his body of work at lightweight and junior welterweight, not for what he done at welterweight. At lightweight he took the world title from Ricky Burns in his background in Glasgow, and he defended it against undefeated Yuriorkis Gamboa. At that time it was a big deal to beat Gamboa, and he picked up the ring belt against Ray Beltran, another guy people didn't really want to face. So he established himself as a top guy at lightweight when he jumped up to junior welterweight, and they absolutely cleaned up, won all 4 major world titles, as well as the ring belt, beat guys like Victor Delorme, Thomas Delorme, sorry, the very tricky Victor Postol, Julius Ndongo, cleaned up the division, and then he went up to welter where he knocked out Jeff Horn to win the WBO belt. But then the trouble started, because all the welterweight players, Manny Pacquiao, Errol Spence, Shawn Porter, Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman, are all promoted by the PVC, so they can have a nice round robin, and they don't really have to have a Crawford fight who is over at top rank. So he's been treading water ever since. 3 title defenses, all by stoppage. In his last fight against Egis Cavaliauka, he won by 9th round stoppage, but in the early rounds it didn't look so good. Cavaliauka he's a sturdy guy, he's a very gritty, he came to win, he's a world-class fighter, but he's not the athlete that Kell Brook is, you know. But still he put hands on Crawford, stunned, hurt him with a right hand. I think it could have been a knockdown, it was ruled a slip. And he nailed him with some left hooks too before Crawford did what he always does. He's a southpaw, he fights equally well as an orthodox fighter. He figured Cavaliauka out, and then he started teeing off on him and stopped him with some very creative combinations there towards the end of the fight. I have to ask the question, is Crawford's lack of elite opposition leading him not to being challenged all that much, and does that lead to him getting a little bit stale in the form book? And Crawford is not a very big welterweight. I don't think he's got the heavy hands and the strength that Errol Spence has. And Brook feels, you know, he's going down to welterweight. But when he fought Spence, by his own admission, he boiled down to it. But the WBO doesn't have a second day weigh-in rule like the IBF does, where they have to be within a certain range of a weight limit. So Brook figures he'll be stronger because he'll have all that time to rehydrate. I guess we'll see, you know, but Crawford needs to just be himself. He needs to be dialed in. He can't afford the lapses of concentrations like he had against Cavaliauka, because if Brook can nail him with that straight right, hurt him. Brook is a good finisher. He might find himself in trouble. But I think he'll be dialed in for this one. For Brook, two things. Can he still withstand the punishment? Did the Golovkin and the Spence fight do some permanent damage to him in his ability to absorb shots? And number two, and I think it did. I think Kell Brook is a little bit brittle to me. I don't think he can take that much. And then the other thing is the weight. Now, fighters move up in weight all the time. It's a natural progression as they grow. As long as you do it gradually, it's no big deal. Others can move down in weight as well. It's not as common, but you know, you get guys who are small heavyweights. Remember Ola Norris, he went down and became a world champion at cruiserweight. So that can also work. But the yo-yo thing, that is where it usually goes awry. Like, for instance, Chris Bird, Roy Jones, moved up and then moved down again, was a disaster. Now, is Kell Brook going to do an Nonito Donaire, who went all the way up and then back down to bantamweight, and suddenly he's a bit of a monster at bantamweight? I don't think so. I think, well, Donaire isn't young either, but usually young guys can do that sort of thing that Canelo used to do. And I don't think at 34, it's not ancient in boxing terms, but for welterweight, Brook isn't a young fighter. And I think that weight cut, even though he can rehydrate, is not going to be the best thing for him. I think it's another decision that's made sort of out of desperation. I would have, if I was his management, would have targeted WBO junior middleweight champion Patrick Teixeira much rather, or even Jamal Charlo. But it's another curious decision. Perhaps Brook surprises us and he's suddenly a beast. What a Cinderella story in career turnaround that would be. But in the end of the day, I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't see it. I think Crawford will be on his P's and Q's. I think Brook will definitely have his moments early on. He's got a great jab. He needs to use that jab, and he needs to use his right hand to hit Crawford like Cavaliauka was able to do, and try and hurt him and finish him. And I think he might be a bigger, stronger welterweight. So muscle Crawford around and then get back on your bike and box and look for the openings. Wait your chance. But I think he's going to have his moments early. It's going to be an exciting fight. But I think Crawford is going to do what he always does. After sort of a start where it looks good for Brook, he's going to get it together. He's going to figure Brook out. And then he's going to start teeing off on him. And once he starts hitting Kell Brook with regularity, I think Kell Brook is going to start falling apart. So I'm going with conventional wisdom, I think, in this fight. Some say Kell Brook is going to go the distance. You know, he might well do that and put up a show that surprise people. But I don't think Crawford has the heavy hands of Spence, like I've said. But it's harder to see Crawford's punches coming than it is to see Spence's punches coming. He's more unorthodox. So I think eventually Crawford is going to stop Kell Brook somewhere around round 9, round 10, and retain his title. So I'm going with Terence Bud Crawford this weekend. Let me know in the comment sections what you think. And until we see each other again, remember to keep those gloves up.